Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chris Webb, Head of Communications at the CW. Welcome to our live broadcast. First of all, welcome to all journalists joining us in the room. Really happy to have you with us. But of course, you for secondary importance levels to all of our members watching online who've done such a tremendous job throughout this ballot campaign. So you will see and hear today the results of the first strike action ballot across BT Group since 1987, the first strike action ballot since privatisation of the company. We want to welcome you all, as I just said. We also want to give just one mention before we kick the press conference off. You might notice in a second that our president of the CW, Karen Rose, is absent. Karen has COVID. Karen's done a tremendous job in helping us get the vote out and deliver the results that you're going to hear shortly. So thank you to you, Karen. The format of today's press conference is going to be a statement of the results from our General Secretary, Dave Ward. And then Dave's going to make a statement to the media. Then we're going to hear a statement from the media from our Deputy General Secretary, Telecoms and Financial Services, Andy Kerr, followed by questions from the press and media in the room, at which point we will close the press conference and move on to one-to-one interviews for any journalists that are looking for those. So if I can, without any further ado, introduce our General Secretary, Dave Ward.
Yeah, so thanks everybody. The results of the ballots that I'm going to read out are all from the independent scrutineer, all certified results that we've just received. So the first one is an industrial action ballot in our trade dispute with Openreach Limited. The number of individuals who are entitled to vote in the ballot was 28,425. The number of votes cast in the ballot was 21,272. That means the turnout was 74.8%, way above the government threshold. The number of spoilt or otherwise invalid voting papers returned was 12. So the results of the voting was yes, 20,358. That's 95.8 in favour of strike action, and no, 902, 4.2%. The second ballot in our trade dispute with British Telecom PLC, the number of individuals who were entitled to vote in the ballot was 10,353. The number of votes cast in the ballot was 6,022. That's a turnout of 58.2%, way above the government threshold. And the results, the number of spoilt or otherwise invalid voting papers returned was 6. And the results of the voting was as follows. Yes, 5,503, which is 91.5% in favour of strike action, and no, 513, 8.5%. In the final ballot with EE, in our trade dispute with EE, we fell short of the government threshold by 8 votes. It was the smallest group, around 2,000 people. It still returned an astonishing 95.5% votes in favour of strike action. Look, I want to set out the context to what's been taking place within British Telecom. And what this result means is that for the first time in nearly 4 decades, we face the prospect of national industrial action across the BT Group. It's an incredible result given the remarkable challenges that are presented to the union by the diverse nature of the workers that have been involved in these ballots. So first of all, this ballot includes thousands of people who have been working from home. It includes thousands of people who work out on the street but work in isolation. They don't have like workplaces, they work throughout the day pretty much on their own. It includes high turnover of workers in some areas, and it's been achieved despite the real culture of fear that has been imposed in the last couple of years by the senior BT management. And we're saying that against this background, workers have come together. They've delivered a fantastic result in support of their union and backing strike action. And we thank our members for their loyalty to the CWU. I want to make a special mention of our call centre workers in BT Group. We believe this is the first time in UK history that call centre workers across multiple sites in the United Kingdom have voted in favour of strike action. Now, these are all workers, the whole of the workers involved in these ballots were key workers during the pandemic. They've done a fantastic job in keeping the company going and in keeping the country connected. And I want to make this point that without these workers, you wouldn't have seen a home working revolution that took place during that period. And the reality is they're all saying enough's enough. We're not putting up with the situation that we find ourselves in. And there are some important facts that sit behind the actual vote in it. First is, of course, everybody knows that it's in the middle of the biggest cost of living crisis in decades. But I also want to say to you and emphasise, this is not a dispute about affordability of a higher pay rise. BT, they posted a big profit as well, BP, but BT posted profits earlier this year of £1.3 billion. And they also paid out £700 million to their shareholders. And at the same time as the CEO was imposing a pay rise of £1,500 on all its workers, his earnings have increased by over 32% to a point where he's now earning over £3.5 million per year. They also put their prices up earlier on this year, way above inflation, and by 10%. So these people are partly to cause for the spiralling inflation, not workers. And what we're saying is simply this: by any measure of fairness, this is completely unacceptable. And what these people are doing, and I believe it's happening across a lot of other companies, they are creating a levelling down agenda in the UK at the same time as the government are talking about levelling up. And we can't carry on like this. It's also important to set out the wider context, because we believe that public support for workers who are taking action, who are returning these type of ballot results, is growing. And we think that's because people are realising now that there is a deep structural imbalance of power and wealth. It permeates the world of work. It's right across how the economy is rigged against working people, and it's driving all of the inequalities that exist in UK society today. And I think the common denominator of this is that, you know, whatever the crisis, whether it's the financial crisis, whether it's the pandemic, whether it's a climate crisis, whether it's the cost of living crisis, people are beginning to realise, and workers are beginning to realise, that one certainty, if they don't stand up now, is that the rich are getting richer and the powerful are getting more powerful. Now, in terms of next steps, we said to our members, and we've made it clear in interviews that we've done across the media, that there wouldn't be a knee-jerk reaction from the union. So we will be inviting senior management to come back to the negotiating table. But I want to make this point absolutely clear. We will expect BT by the end of next week to confirm with the union that they're willing to set aside the imposition of pay and come to the table with a significantly improved offer. If they can't do that by the end of next week, then we will serve notice for strike action. I just want to summarise really before we open up for questions that I think this is a remarkable result because of the type of workers that are involved. Many of them probably the first time that they've ever voted for strike action. What it proves beyond any shadow of a doubt is that no worker in the UK today is unreachable. It proves that all workers are ready to stand up and fight for higher pay, better jobs, terms and conditions in some cases, obviously. And I think our simple message today from the CWU is that every worker counts or no worker counts. Happy to take any of your questions.
Thank you, Dave. Fantastic. I'm going to ask Andy to make a short statement to the
Yeah.
media as well.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks, Dave, for setting that out. Yeah, it's a historic day in some respects. We haven't taken any industrial action in BT for some 35 years, and we never took this decision lightly at all. But it was a case of enough is enough. First of all, quite clearly, the pay rise that they offered us was not enough. But really, the biggest issue was the imposition of it. A company that thinks they can just impose without talking to their trade unions, well, they've now got a shock as far as I'm concerned. It's now, I'm really grateful to all our members in BT, Openreach and in EE for the support they gave this union, for the support they gave themselves. And I also would like to put on record my thanks to all my reps around the country who have done a tremendous job over the last a couple of weeks or so on this ballot. It is a tremendous result, and even in EE, where we didn't quite make it, as Dave said, 8 votes. These are the lowest paid workers, some of the lowest paid workers in BT, not far above the living wage in BT, a blue chip company. And these people, in some respects, why did they not vote? Because they were scared in case they had to take industrial action, because they couldn't afford to take a day off work or more than one day off work. There was a lot of young people involved in that area, and of course the call centres, and the attrition rates in BT are running at 25 to 35%, and that's a lot to do with the wages these people are on. So we've got a real issue there. But getting back to the affordability, Dave says is absolutely correct. This company can afford much more. We've said this all along. I don't accept and will never accept the position of the BT board or the senior management saying it's not affordable. Of course it's affordable, £1.3 billion. And they can give the dividend out to their shareholders of £761 million. Well, I tell you, there's a couple of things about unfairness in this. If they can give 58% of the profits to the shareholder, but they only give 5.8% of the profits to the workers, I don't believe that's fair. I don't think anybody in this country would think that that's fair in any way, shape, or form. And neither do I think it's right that a company like BT, who actually understand that the workers that they've got and the employed by them actually don't earn enough to live. That's why we've got food banks in parts of BT, in some of the call centres in BT. What an absolutely atrocious position to be in. They call them community pantries or some sort of fancy name to it. It's a food bank. It's as simple as that. And they recognise they don't pay the workers enough to live from one month to another. That is an absolute disgrace in this day and age for any so-called blue chip company. So I won't be taking any lectures from anybody about the affordability of this company in any way, shape or form. It's quite clear, and as Dave has outlined, this is a bigger issue. It's not workers' wage rises that puts up inflation. You know, we are going through a period of problems, and we have done for a couple of years. But all the pain has actually been put on the workers of this country. None of the pain's been put on shareholders. None of the pain's been put on the big bosses. And it's about time the tide was turned in that respect. So I'm really grateful that we've got this result. Yes, as Dave has outlined, both Dave and I have said all the way through this, we are willing to discuss this with BT, and I will be discussing with it hopefully next week. I hope they will come to the table. But I will say this, there's no point coming to the table and just to say no, and just to say there is no more there. If they want to come to the table, they have to be serious and they want to negotiate and have this real discussions about this. But if they don't either come to the table or they do come and say there is no more, and quite clearly that's the last, we will have no option but to serve notice for industrial action, and we will carry it out. And I think people have to understand some of the work our people do in this country. It's my members who actually I answer the calls when you phone 999. You know, obviously we don't put people into jeopardy. We would never do that. That's not the sort of union that we would be in any way, shape or form. But that's the kind of work that they've got to do. We work in security. We work in the police and in the Ministry of Justice. We work for the MOD and keep those places going. we build the broadband that this country is going to be built on for the next few years. And if they want to invest, as the UK should be investing in broadband, and we are the union that's argued for it longer than the company have actually argued for it, and longer than any government has actually argued for it. If they want to invest in broadband, they need to invest in the people who are actually producing it and are actually putting it in the ground. And it's about time people started to wake up to what our actual members do out there. You don't see our members very much because they're behind the scenes. You don't actually see what they do in good. You only see them when your broadband fails, when your mobile goes down, when other things happen in this country. That's when our workers are at the fore. And certainly over the last 2 years, the work they've put in the pandemic, over the pandemic, has been a tremendous amount of work. They've not asked for anything extra for doing that work. All they're looking for is a fair wage. And that's all we as a union will be asking on their behalf.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Dave. Has anyone got any questions in the Joe?
Joel Dills from ITV News. I mean, the company says the pay offer it's made is worth 5% to the average worker and 8% for the lowest paid. Can you just say what's unfair about that and what you are looking for? And secondly, in terms of if there is industrial action, the public noticed when railway workers went on strike. What will the public notice if and when BT and Openreach workers go on strike?
Thank you. I'm going to let Dave take that on first. Then
Yeah, look, I mean, first of all, I mean, we always want to achieve a settlement. The objective of any dispute is not to have a strike, it's to reach a settlement and a fair settlement with a company. And as we've explained, we're going to give them that opportunity. But, you know, we are serious about this. So, yes, there could be an impact. That impact, you know, I mean, whether or not you believe that it's the impact that makes the company come to the table, the impact in reality is that our members, I mean, they roll out and maintain the whole of the UK's infrastructure on broadband. And as Andy has pointed out, there's lots of other jobs they do. They manage, you know, high-level contracts with some key business operations, security operations, government operations. So yes, there will be an impact, but you know, that's down to BT. In terms of the offer, yes, the £1,500, it did mean different amounts to different people. I don't think the percentages were exactly what you were saying. It was lower than that for some of the people. But yes, that might explain to some extent, Joel, that the reality of why the EE ballot, where they were all some of the lower paid members, where they would have got probably about 8%. But can I say that as part of that, that wasn't an offer in terms of a pay, it was an imposition to get those workers to the living wage. So about 4 or 5% of that, I think, was to get them to that, and there was a couple of percent on top. So, you know, you've got to take into account here that a lot of those workers that received the highest amount from that overall lump sum were actually very, very low paid workers.
Thank you, Andy.
Yeah, I mean, just to follow up from what Dave just said at the end there, I think to put in context, BT actually gave those workers the ones, and it did range from something like 3.8 to 7.9%, Joe, was the sort of range, if you like. But the ones on 7.9, which is the lowest paid workers in mainly in call centres, and EE being a lot of it, but also in BT consumer part of it. What they did earlier this year, in January this year, BT actually gave them nearly £1,000 of a pay rise. It's £1,000 of the 1,500, not on top of the 1,500, so we're clear. They gave them £1,000 at the beginning of the year in recognition that the wages were too low. Their admission, not mine, they gave them that money to stop the attrition rates. The attrition rates in the contact centres they run was running at 35%, nearly 35%. And it was to stem that because people weren't staying and leaving after a few months in the job. So about £1,000, as Dave just said there, that's where the £1,000 came from. That was to get them to the level. So in reality, I would argue, and I have argued and will continue to argue, they probably got a pay rise of about 2.9 because the company had recognised they took them to a certain level. and the piece above it, which was, say, about that sort of numbers.
In terms of what we want, you asked that question, and we haven't
Yeah.
answered that. We want a substantial pay rise for our members that recognises the cost of living, that inflation is at 9.1, expected to peak around 11% in October. RPI, which is actually, we believe, a fairer measure for working people with inflation, is at 11.7% currently. So yeah, we want a substantial pay rise, and the point we're making is this company could have afforded to have given their workers a pay rise that reflected the efforts that they've made during the pandemic, as well as the impact of the cost of living crisis. Now, I'm not going to set a figure on that because, you know, that is a matter for negotiation. But I do want to add this point. You know, we're getting a bit fed up of this position where workers keep getting blamed as though somehow, when we ask for you know, significant pay rises in the circumstances that we've described, that somehow we're spiraling inflation. This is not true. And it's the companies, you need to take this point away and look at this, and you'll see the truth of this. They put up, and it ain't just BT that's doing this, there's a lot of companies, they put up their prices when inflation was about 5% by 10%. And, you know, they're the ones causing this. And why are they doing that? Well, they're doing it to pay money out to shareholders and increase their own level of earnings at the top. They're siphoning out money. That money, a proportion of that money that went to shareholders, any decent company in the circumstances that we face today would have turned round, we believe, and said, you know what, this year, we know that inflation's predicted to go up further and further. We're not going to give as much to them. We're going to put some of that back in to the workers. They chose not to value their workers, and that's got to end.
Thank you, Dave. Anyone else? Gentleman at the back.
Afternoon, Dave and Andy. Hope you're well. It's obviously a big day for the Communication Workers Union. The thing that stands out most to me looking at those numbers is call centre workers. If I'm right, that's the biggest call centre strike, if it goes ahead, that will ever have happened in this country. 9,000 call centre workers. These are some of the most low paid, some of the most precarious workers in the country, if you look across the call centre industry. Can you tell me, you know, is that something you expected to happen? What do you think is the significance of a call centre action on that scale, and how was it pulled off? Given that it will be a landmark in that industry for the Treasury movement.
Thank you, Rowan. Dave first.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly how we see it. These are a group of workers where there's a high turnover, low paid, very highly pressurised job. I've been to some of these call centres, and I have to say, the pressure that the workers themselves are under for the level of pay that they get. I mean, the message seems to be, you know, you've always got to work harder and faster for less. So, you know, it is a landmark vote because it is the first time in UK history where across multiple sites of call centres that we've achieved that level of a yes vote. How was it achieved? Because I think, one, we've obviously worked hard, our reps have worked hard, incredibly hard. We've engaged working people again. And I think working people are engaged in a reciprocal way in these type of debates that are going on. I think the message and the messages that trade unions right across the piece are putting out is cutting through to ordinary workers everywhere. And that's why I believe we'll get support from the public. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the background to those votes.
Andy?
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of covered, but when call centre workers in the UK, across the whole of the UK, are probably some of the lowest paid in sort of industry, if you like. And there is an issue, no matter what company it is, whether it's BT, whether it's Teleperformance, whether it's Convergys, whether it's, you know, Virgin Media, I can name them all if you want to name them all. They're all in the same position, and they're all fighting. Some of them are certainly fighting in the same pool for the same jobs, and they've been cutting. What's happened in the contact centre industry over the last 3, 4, 5 years or so, they've been cutting costs, and the cutting of costs is actually been put onto the workers. So they've been cutting the wages. They've certainly not been raising the wages. And it is a kind of cutthroat industry out there. The margins are very low because the companies they work for, whether it's BT, they employ their own people, or whether it's a call centre that works for another company, the margins are low there. But they always put it down to the workers. And as you know, our members are quite clearly saying, BT's admitted it, as I said to you. They gave them £1,000 because they accepted they could not get workers. And the attrition rates was 35%. That's typical of a call centre industry in the UK. So there is a real issue out there. And what we've been trying to say to BT, what BT should be doing is a blue chip company, is one of the biggest companies in the UK, and you know, FTSE 100 company. They should be starting to do, not to go to the race to the bottom, as they have been falling over the last few years, but companies like that, like BT, should be starting to actually pay their workers a decent, fair wage, so they actually starts to go up the way. So that's the argument. So we have got members in many other contact centres around the country, many other companies, and I hope more of them join in these places, because we need contact centre workers to come together for people to understand. These are jobs that are not well paid, but they are highly pressurised jobs, and we think, certainly in BT deserve it. But I would also say contact centre workers in every company deserve a pay rise.
Thank you, Andy. Any more questions from the media? Yes, Colin?
Sorry, Ava Santina from Joe. Oh, do you mean someone else?
Yeah.
Sorry, Ava Santina from Joe. What does it look like tangibly? Like, what would we have blackouts, or like just like a tangible example of what a strike would look like? And also, have you had any communication with the Labour Party, and are they supporting the strikes, or are you not speaking with them?
I mean, look, we've set out what we believe, you know, that there could be a very significant impact. I can't say that there's going to be blackouts or anything like that. Hopefully not. In terms of you know what you meant by that, but the significance of it, you know, you can't underplay the reality that these are the workers combined who do definitely control the rollout and the maintenance of UK's broadband infrastructure. And therefore there will be a significant impact. There's lots of different contracts that some of our members who are involved in these ballots, you know, key contracts with government agencies, security agencies, that they manage those contracts. So it will have an impact. But look, you know, I keep saying this, genuinely, we are not in this to have a strike. We want to achieve a fair settlement for our members, and that will be our aim. But as we've said continuously, you know, the company have imposed this offer. They got that wrong. They thought they could get away with this, and they've been proved wrong. And we're inviting them back to the negotiating table, but they must come back confirming that they're setting aside the imposition and that they're going to put a better offer on the table. Then we can sit down and negotiate properly with them. If they can't do that, then we'll have no choice or alternative but to serve notice. In terms of the Labour Party, you know, I mean, I don't know why the Labour Party is almost seems to be either sitting on the fence, or if we look at some of the stuff that seems to have been happening, you know, and I saw an interview on Sunday. I was actually being interviewed just after on the same show from David Lammy, that looked like he was picking a fight with working people. And that does seem to be something that's happening within the Labour Party. So we'll be writing to all the Labour MPs. You know, we're an affiliated union, and we'll be asking for their support. And then it's up to them. But, you know, I want to be absolutely clear. Our focus is on supporting our members at the moment. That's our job, and that's going to be the priority for the CWU.
Colin?
Hi, this is Anna Gross from the FT. Just a couple of practical questions. The first is, because EE didn't reach quorum, if you call it that, does that mean that they wouldn't be able to strike and the others would? And also, you gave percentages for each of the three groups. Have you, so that I don't have to do the maths, have you aggregated them? What's the total percent in favour across the group?
So we won't aggregate, because obviously we don't want to. We've got to keep it very clear with the law.
I'm not a great mathematician, and we can't. But they are three separate ballots.
Okay.
But I can pretty much see that if you aggregate the results, particularly because the big high percentage turnouts are in the biggest group of workers. And the one that fell 8 votes short, 49.7 turnout, is a group. The EE part of it was about 2,000. The Openreach part is about 28,000 workers. So I think it's fairly easy to say, not that you can use that because we've done them as separate disputes. The aggregate is massively yes across all 3.
Yeah.
And the question about whether EE could take action, Andy?
The aggregate is probably around about 67-68% if you want to do the maths.
He's a better mathematician.
It's something around about there anyway. But as Dave's explained, we as separate. You know, had it not been for the trade union laws, that's the number you would have got. But the trade union laws are what they are. I suppose at this point in time, on the basis of the result we've got, are we able to serve notice to take industrial action in the EE? The answer, the simple answer is unfortunately no, is the answer there. We will consider that result of that. We'll discuss with our reps in EE, we'll discuss with our members in EE what that actually means. And the good news is, in some respects, I have to say, unfortunately, because we balloted when we balloted, because there's always a cut-off for any ballot. Had we balloted now, and the 200 or 300 extra members that have joined in the last couple of weeks had actually got a vote, we'd have been well within it, because those 200 or 300 members have joined because they wanted to vote, yes, and unfortunately couldn't. So we're not despondent about that. Remember, EE's only came into BT over the last 4 or 5 years, I think it is now. We only had recognition in the EE for the last nearly about 3 years or so, whereas we've had recognition in other parts of the company. For us to get to the position of getting recognition for these workers and getting to the position of taking them through this ballot and getting the result we've got, I think it's actually a victory in some respects, and it's something this union will certainly build on in the future. But no, we can't take it out. But that's not to say, those members in EE won't be supporting this union and supporting their fellow workers in some other way.
Yeah. To confirm, the other 2 group of workers can take strike action. Any more questions? No? Okay, so I'm going to give Dave just a minute or so to wrap up the press conference, and then we'll open up to questions, one-to-one interviews, yeah?
Yeah, okay, yeah. Well, look, thanks for coming. Obviously, thanks to all of our members who are watching on the live stream. And, we'll take this forward in a way that does the very best for our members. BT, have been sent a message without any shadow of a doubt that people have had enough of the way that they are treating their workforce with utter and complete contempt. Let's hope we can find a settlement before we get to the point where we have to serve notice for strike action. So thanks for coming.